Adrian Scott. Scott.
Greetings and shalom. This is Adrian Scott. Welcome to Truth and Testimony, the broadcast, as we continue my video series in my trip to Israel. This next video that we're going to be getting into is what I call round 2 in Jerusalem. So by this point, we have been there. I think the Feast of Sukkot was pretty close to wrapping up at that point. And we had been to Tel Aviv. We had been round 1 to Jerusalem, had done our day-long bus tour of the Galilee, and these are all videos that are already up, so if you haven't seen those, I do encourage you to go back and check them out. And this is the next day after our return from the Galilee trip, and this was a pretty big one because probably the two major things today were going to the Israel Museum and also Yad Vashem, which is the Holocaust Museum. And yeah, that one's pretty emotional. I will give just a little heads up ahead of time. Both of those locations, when you go there, they basically say no pictures or videos permitted. Although in talking to some people at the Israel Museum, they were like, yeah, they have to kind of technically say that, and it's more or less true, but they don't much police it. And true to the word, I mean, everywhere we went in there, pretty much everyone had, phones out and were taking pictures and whatnot. So I don't know that I ever pulled my Canon out. No, I had to actually check it at the door. I wasn't allowed to bring it in. However, I did get a few pictures and videos. I wanted to try to respect that as much as possible, but there were just a couple of real key things that I really wanted to try to get some pictures of that just jumped out at me, so I did. Yad Vashem, there actually was actively people going around checking, and so I was not able to get anything inside Yad Vashem. I did get some pictures and videos surrounding there. There's a plaza called the Warsaw Plaza, I think, as it commemorates the Warsaw Ghetto. But a few outdoor things that I did get, and there was one smaller indoor area that was more open, and well, you'll see when we get there. That was pretty profound anyways. So at any rate, I mean, that was the most of everything. Other than that, it was kind of going for walks, checking out the park, things like that. So as we get into that, just keep that in mind, and I will stop and give some explanations where needed. One thing I did want to mention is with the Israel Museum, I'm very loosely going to mention the things that I do take pictures of. However, for one thing, there is an app you can get for the Israel Museum. It's intended to be kind of a self-guided tour when you're actually there. However, there are some pictures to it, but it basically covers all the attractions in this app, and you can download them in modules. So the archaeology wing and the Torah wing and just different areas of the museum, and they give you, it's like an audio guided tour with description of what these things are. So to get some more information, you could look into that app. You don't actually have to be in the museum. It helps so that you actually have the object in front of you as you're listening to the description, but you don't need that. You can also just even look up a picture of stuff and listen to the description, but that's one way. Also, I mean, obviously the internet's a pretty good resource for stuff. So if you really are interested in getting more information on any of these things that I do have pictures and videos of, then I would encourage you to pursue that. So having said that, we kind of get started looking at the slideshow and videos in this section, and we just start off with the very first thing. So it was challenging at times to find somewhere to get coffee, and although I did want to reduce my coffee intake while I was there, I still like to have at least one morning coffee. As it is, I found in the local grocery stores that we went to in Tel Aviv and in Jerusalem, I found this brand of this canned coffee, and it was just perfect. For one thing, it was quite tasty, so I really enjoyed it, but it gave me my coffee fix for the morning. And just seeing the can, it just totally reminded me of like a beer keg. So that kind of appealed to me in that weird way. So that's sort of what this one is, just to emphasize that the beer keg effect. And that was this can right here is my morning cup of joe. That was it. And every day from point on, it was water. Now, this is a very interesting one. So they have a park that is, it was not too far away from our Airbnb, but it's kind of central to town. And I almost liken it to like Central Park in New York, if anyone has ever been there or seen it in a movie. So it's this big park that's right in the middle of town, and you'll see a few pictures that kind of touch on that. But a thing to note here is the date that picture was taken, and you can see how crowded it is there. There's just a ton of people and a ton of kids. And I mentioned this in a previous video where I had some footage of some kids' playgrounds. But the playgrounds there are just wild. I mean, that's almost like a little outdoor Disneyland, that thing. It was huge. You could go and do different activities and rides and things in that playground for most of the day and hardly duplicate things. It was enormous. And that tower with the slide, we have a park near my mother's house. And whenever I take the girls to visit her, we'll generally go over to this park. And there's a tower with a couple of different slides that come out of it at different heights. It is half the size of this thing in Jerusalem. So it's like, yeah, get some altitude. I don't know, I think they should start offering you put a bungee rope on and dive off the bridge diving with the bungee rope and do that off the top of this tower. It was big enough for it. But yeah, just mainly the observation was, it's a really nice park or a nice playground in a really nice park. But just note the crowds, because we're going to come back to that a little bit later after October 7th. This was another very interesting thing here where, because it can tend to be a very dry and arid place, it's desert really, or was anyways. They have this incredible irrigation system that basically covers the entire city of Jerusalem, so far as I could tell. And that's how they had these shrubs and bushes and trees and everything on the go. So what you're seeing here, all of those tubes, those purple tubes, is the irrigation system. It's like almost like a little weeping system. And yeah, it is. You find that pretty much anywhere you go in town, especially where there's foliage. But that really got me, because it was such an interesting thing. I've never seen that before. Now, we're very blessed and fortunate in the part of the world I live at, where I think technically this area is referred to as a temperate rainforest. But we get lots of water. Yeah, so this was a new thing for me to see anything like this. But just the fact that you got to picture this. Jerusalem's a big city, very crowded and everything, and just to have this just about everywhere. Everywhere you'd go, you'd see an irrigation system like this. Really cool. This is just a picture of the Knesset. This would be the parliamentary building where the Israeli government meets. And of course, I had to get myself outside of the Knesset, but that's it is. And we basically were just walking past that as we were making our way to the Israel Museum. And this was another location we passed on our way to the Israel Museum, is the National Library. I got this picture. This is one of my pictures, as is this. But I did include a couple of, like an overhead shot and one of the interior. I kind of borrowed these from online just to show you, but the first two were my images. So this one's like a stock photo of the outside of it. So I'm like on the back end of that building, back corner end of that building. And this is the inside of it, which is just a really neat place. It was, I don't know that it was open at the time. It might have been, but we really wanted to have our time for the Israel Museum. And here is the Israel Museum. Yeah, just a broader shot there, and making our way up to the intro. Of course, I did have my bag with my tripod and camera. I had to check that in at the front door, as I mentioned. But we get inside, and the first thing that we headed for, because this was maybe the big stop for me that I wanted to do. That what you see behind me there is, okay, I got to back up a little bit. So I'm assuming most of everyone watching this is at least familiar in passing with something known as the Dead Sea Scrolls. This is an area called Qumran, which is on the south of Israel, or southeast of Israel, southern side of Israel anyways. And it is where these caves were discovered that contained this incredible archive. It's considered one of the greatest archaeological finds ever, period. One of the greatest. And so they had this whole multitude of scrolls in there, different things. Some were just writings for the community. Other things were copies of portions of Bible. Other things were kind of looking to be biblical texts, but were not part of the Bible. This behind is like the crown. This is the gem of all of the finds, because it is a complete scroll of the writings of the prophet Isaiah, or the book of Isaiah, we'd call it in our Bible. But that is it is to be said, a copy of it. The actual scroll is kept there at the museum, but it's in a well-secured vault, and only a very few select eyes actually get to see that. But they did this, it's like there's a term for it which I can't think of, a picture copy. So it's not a handwritten copy, it is a photographic copy of the entire scroll of Isaiah. And it is one of the centerpieces of this museum, and was one of the main one of the main things, the other one you'll see in a minute, that I wanted to see at the Israel Museum. So this was the first time I kind of had to pop my camera out and kind of sneak a picture in there. Was just me with the Isaiah scroll. That's a big deal in my world. And that right there, that, what do they call that? The Temple of the Book, Shrine of the Book. I think it's Shrine of the Book is what it's referred to in part. But that interesting little piece of architecture there, that is, inside there is the museum with all of these scrolls and antiquities and everything, including that copy of Isaiah, which is right at the center of it. And this is the outside of it. So I just had to get that picture. And so, yeah, we'd finished in that part of the museum. So the museum has multiple buildings spaced over this courtyard. So you'll walk from one region to another. Then you can get into the actual museum, which has its own set of wings. It's a big, big museum, and a complex, really. But yeah, we had to start here. This was the big one for us. And this is just an outside shot of it. And of course, I had to get myself, and it is very dimly lit in there, because you can't expose some of the artifacts that are in there, because some of them were legitimate scrolls. Because if they're exposed to too much light, it can damage them. So they have to keep it very temperature controlled and light controlled and everything. So you can notice I'm squinting quite heavily here. We've just come out of that museum, and to hit the sunshine like that, it made an impact. So this, along with the Isaiah scroll, was really the other thing that I wanted to see here. This is a complete miniature recreation of Old Jerusalem, including the Temple Mount with the Second Temple period, Solomon's Temple, we'll call it, right in the center there. But it includes the rest of what was Jerusalem at that time. Another interesting story is what in the very bottom left corner there, I believe that's the area, is for a long time they said, well, that's the city of David. But at some point, in reality, away from this miniature, at Old City, they started doing some excavations. I believe it was to make a parking lot for more tourists and stuff in Old City. So they broke ground, started digging just outside of the walls of Old City, and boom, they found what they, I believe, conclusively proved to actually be the city of David. So not this area. It would actually be, I guess, more to the right of where the temple was. I'm trying to think of line it up to where I saw everything. Anyways, for a long time, they thought it was that bottom left area, but then it turns out it was this other area. So, hey, you know what? We can all make mistakes. It's nice that they found it, and there's, as of when we were there, they were still actively excavating that particular location. But yeah, just a part of that. And it's just so fascinating to look at this little miniature model of Solomon's temple. And they say miniature, but I mean, you can see the gentleman standing at the back fence there. I mean, that entire thing is almost a city block big. So it's not tiny by any means. There's me squinting in the sunshine again. This was the first pass of taking a look at that. I had to get myself in front of this mock-up and get a little bit of a closer shot of it. Yeah, just, it is something. It is something to see. If you ever have the opportunity to go to Israel, I think that this is a must stop and check out this. It is so cool. And it just looks neat. It was really well done. Yeah, just very, very cool. Very cool. Just getting shots from all kinds of different angles. This is kind of the back end. Do a little sweeping panoramic video here. And I'm just imagining little people, as if that was real, walking up and down those streets, including Yeshua, Jesus, and his disciples. Just showing some of the detail of some of the structures that they've recreated in this. Another back end of a shot with an entry gate, one of the gates into the second temple. The entry from the first side. This would be, I guess, the east side. This was a mosaic done map of Jerusalem at the time of the Second Temple. Now this one here, if you want to pause, you can pause. I tried to make it as clear as possible, but you can actually see some of the numbers and identify them, like number 29 there, you know, Sepinus Tower in the corner of the third wall, etc., etc. So they had this at signs like this at 2 or 3 different angles, which kind of illustrate different areas and what they were. Okay, so this is one that I will very loosely mention, and you can actually see the inscription over the stone. So that's the actual archaeological find. That's the stone that was found, and there was an inscription on the stone. So again, I'm doing a very loose storytelling of this, but for a long time, it was argued by some that King David was not an actual human being, that he was a mythological figure, kind of in the lines of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table and stuff like that. You know, that it just was such a story that was embraced by the culture, it almost became real, but that he wasn't actually real. That was kind of the claim. So this was one of, if not the first archaeological discovery that mentioned in reality, in actually existing, this King David, right? And so the one line in it, which you can see in the inscription behind it, is, "And there they anointed David king." So, you know, it was just finally a piece of physical proof to show that this person was not mythological, that he actually lived, he actually ruled over Israel, and yeah, that it not a story, that it was real. So a very significant archaeological find, and a profound one for me, because I always find it interesting that every, well, maybe I can't say every, but a lot of major archaeological, things will come along and where they'll say that, for example, the Jewish people, the Israelites were never in Egypt. And then they find Hebrew writing and evidence of them, digging up clay and making bricks. And now you have the actual archaeological site showing this. It kind of makes it hard to say that they weren't there. And it's just like every time they'll have some claim that refutes or attempts to refute the Bible, some archaeological find will be made that says, nope, it's true too. And I kind of think that's God at work. That's what I always attribute it to. And this is one of those examples. Now, you might notice the quirky look on my face on this one. That behind me, not the columns, but the little seat there, is something they call the seat of Moses. And this would be a place where the high priest, I believe it was the high priest, in the synagogue would sit down and they would proclaim takanot, which is man-made regulations. Basically, the stuff more or less that made up the Talmud or the oral law that the Jewish people observe. And it's kind of funny that that's the case, because they would say that when those proclamations were made from that seat, that was considered as being authority directly from God, given to them sitting in that seat. So it's like if it's decreed sitting on that seat, you observe it, right? Period. There's no argument about it. And the problem was that a lot of the things that they started decreeing, they would say, because of that authority, they would say that it came directly from God. Okay, if you want to accept the Talmud as on that authority, then that's what it is. There's a lot of others, including a lot of Christians, Messianics, and perhaps more interestingly, even Karaite Jews, which is another faction of Jewish culture, the Karaites. And the Karaites basically recognize the Tanakh, the Old Testament of the Bible, but they reject the oral law, the Talmud, saying that did not come from God, it came from man. And that's kind of the viewpoint that I come from. So, again, using a very quick biblical example, when the Pharisees and Sadducees approach Yeshua and his disciples and ask Yeshua why his disciples aren't washing their hands before a meal, and it's that idea of that ritual washing with a pot where you pour the water over your hands and you go back and forth and do this. Nowhere in Scripture, nowhere in the Tanakh does it mention to do this. This is not ever a commandment from God in the Bible. This was something decreed later. Now, if you believe that it is, divinely authorized from God, is sitting on that seat, well, then you can say it's from God. Of course, on the other side of that, they say that they don't have that divine authority. I find it very interesting that there's such a close connection to that in the Catholic Church with the papal throne, right? When the Pope sits on that throne, he can make these decrees, and once again, very similar to this idea with the high priest in the synagogue for the Jewish people, is if the Pope's sitting on that throne making a decree, it's law, it is written, it is done. And I just find interesting that that's a kind of a close connection there. But I had to get this one in, so there's that look like, oh boy, here we go, seat of Moses. Now, we went to the synagogue at Capernaum. It would have had a seat like this. This particular one is not from that synagogue. I cannot think of the name, but it's a synagogue that was not too far away from the synagogue at Capernaum, just a bit north of it. And that's where this seat of Moses is from. Now, and I'm not even sure, this may not be the original itself. This may be a copy, a very close copy of it, or it might be the original. I'd have to look into that, or you can look into that if you want. But either way, it's either the actual seat or a very close copy of it. So this one, just to see the the significance and the love and the respect that the Jewish people have for the Torah. That, of course, is a Torah scroll, and it's got its covering on it. And then there's the paneling, which would be part of, I think, the container they kept it in was called the Ark. Don't quote me on that. I could very easily be wrong on that, but I think that's maybe what it was called. But anyways, just to see the ornate elaborateness and the significance that they attribute to this, I mean, that's not a light level of craftsmanship to do stuff like that. And it just really stood out to me. And again, you can hardly miss that menorah. It's all on almost everything. As an interesting little trivia fact, as I understand it, in 1948, when the UN were making the resolution to make Israel a country through, I guess it was the recommendation of England at the time, when this was all happening, one of the things that came up is, okay, well, if you're going to be a country, you'll need a flag. What is your flag going to be? And of course, we ended up with the blue and white with the Star of David. But probably the other primary runner was to have their flag. I don't know if it was still blue and white, but basically a menorah instead of the Star of David. I mean, that's the significance of the menorah, that it made it that seriously into consideration to be the national flag of the country. So yeah, just there's a little bit of significance of the menorah for you. Now this section, I do believe these were different. They're all an assortment of candle holders, or some of them in the form of menorahs, some of them in other objects. But you can see there's names of countries. So, because the Jewish culture, I mean, is certainly not limited to Israel, certainly not limited to the United States. You know, there's a presence of these people all over the world. And so this is just an example of a little bit of stylization from one region to another. They all ultimately serve the same function, but, you know, have a different look from area to area. And also just the whole display itself kind of recessed in the wall and backlit like that. It was really neat. It was one of the things, just as a visual. You could almost set that up as like a postcard if you framed it right. But very cool. Anyways, that's a bench right there. You could just sit on there and look at the stuff for a while. And we did. You don't see that part, but yeah, just really cool. So this was also such a fascinating story, and I have to pause for a moment, dwell on this one and take a look at it. So, oh boy, I believe this was from Morocco, if I'm not mistaken, that this was a Moroccan synagogue, and it was being disassembled and removed. Rather than losing it or having it destroyed or anything, an arrangement was made to have all of this stuff, all of these objects are directly from this synagogue. Again, I believe it's in Morocco. And they had it transplanted to the Israel Museum. Kind of an interesting little thing, because in Morocco, I guess, they didn't have it like inside a regular building. However, the actual structure was set up, it would just be out on the sand or in the sand. So what you actually see there, you can see there's a little wooded floor area with the columns there. And if you look close, you can see a little glass fence going around. But on the other side of that is all sand. And just in an attempt to recreate the effect of this synagogue from, again, I believe it's Morocco. But just really cool that they recreated it to this level of detail within the Israel Museum. Just really cool. To the fact of having, this lighting behind the windows. That's actually not an outdoor behind there. You're inside a building, but they're lighting it in such a way to make it look like that's the sunlight outside. You know, a nice sunny day outside, and you're going to synagogue. So just super cool, super cool. And in fact, the next one I have here, I believe, was a synagogue that was transplanted again. This one, I believe, was from Italy, completely relocated and reassembled and set up in the Israel Museum. Really cool. I know they have terminology for all of the different elements up here. I can't remember it all. However, as a note, that area above where you can see the panels kind of going around and they got all the little holes in it, those are all shutters effectively that will lift open. And that is the area up there where all the women would go. So the men would be down below and the women would be up top there. But and that's the way they would do their synagogue services. But you can see the difference in style and design and architecture from one country to another. And this was another one that was just really fascinating. You can actually, in the museum, go up into that upper deck area and take a look, which is cool. Greetings and shalom. I am Adrian Scott, and this is Truth and Testimony, the broadcast. I'm broadcasting here just from our apartment in Jerusalem. And it is morning here, currently I think about 7 a.m. So we're getting ready for our activities for today, but we've had a full list since we've been here. And yesterday we did the Israel Museum, and I got some interesting pictures there. It's been interesting because in an area that really keys itself in on kind of tourism, it does make it a little challenging to be a tourist at times, because so many places I have not been able to take my Canon camera. So I've kind of been limited to my phone. Yeah, been an interesting one. But at any rate, this is just another quick update, and as we're about halfway through our trip here, we've got a few more things on our list that we want to go do. We'll be making some more trips back to the old city and taking a look at a few things that have just, we've already been numerous times to these particular locations, but they're always very, very busy, and we just have not been able to physically get in. So we're going to try that one again, see if we can do that, including the Tomb of David. But yeah, so just kind of a short update on that. And the weather has actually been behaving for me anyways. I don't do heat very well, and it obviously can get pretty warm in a location like this. But for the last few days, it's been more overcast than anything, and the temperatures have been sitting in the mid 20s or so, mid to high 20s, so 25, 26, 27 degrees Celsius. And I'm not sure what that would be in Fahrenheit, but if anyone's interested, they can do the conversions. But that's where it's been sitting. And so it makes it a little more temperate for me. The first couple of days when we were in Tel Aviv, it was 30 plus, and the humidity was through the roof. It was, oh boy, did that knock me for a loop. That was a tough one. Took me a couple of days just to recover from that. Anyways, I'm not going to belabor this too terribly long. So yeah, we'll be making another trip to our second museum today. This one is called Yad Vashem. It is the Holocaust Museum in Israel. It's going to be most of an all-day one, and I'm probably bringing some Kleenex with me, because it can be an emotional one. After that, yeah, pretty much the last few stops that we had to make are going to be back at the old city. We did do our bus tour the other day, where we went up to the Sea of Galilee and also the River Jordan. And yeah, got a bunch of pictures and videos from those, so I'll be featuring some of that later on the channel. But yeah, back to the old city, and I took a video of the sunrise coming up over the Mount of Olives, and that was pretty impactful. But it was one of those overcast mornings, so I'm actually thinking tomorrow when we go back there, it's supposed to be nice and clear again. I'm going to give that one another shot and just see if I can get a slightly better capture of that. But either way, it's a pretty profound one right there, just in and of itself. Sadly, we were not able to actually get over to the Mount of Olives. It's in an area that's a bit riskier to go to, and just not quite willing to take the chance, especially not with that kind of carrying that kind of gear around and stuff. But yeah, so I guess I'll just wrap it up there. There's the update for now, and just enjoying our time in Jerusalem. I'll leave you with a closing shot here of the view from my balcony. Not much of a scenic view, but it certainly does give you a little taste of Jerusalem. So here it is There's a lot of city cramped into a small space. That is a street down there, fully used. And we've got a major market district just up the street that way, which continues down the street in this other direction. But here's kind of what we can see from our deck. And you can see a little bit of that overcast. This is supposed to clear up today and become more sunny. And just down in the little plaza of our building that we're staying in, scooters are really big here. Some flowers on our deck. And there are about 1.5 million wild cats. Apparently, as the story goes, they were kind of brought into the area or had their population increased in the area to deal with a rather significant rat problem. I wonder if I can zoom in on him a little bit. There he is. He's hiding behind the tree. But yeah, there's about 1 million of those little guys wandering around. All over, right in downtown Jerusalem, running in and out of traffic. But there we are. From Yerushalayim. And I will conclude with that. I wish blessings to all of you. And I hope you all have a great day. And we will talk to you soon. Bye for now. So this is at Yad Vashem. Again, this is not one of my photos. It's a stock one, just kind of showing an overhead. If you take a look at that, then you can see there's a very interesting, the building in the middle, it's like a triangle shaped, and it runs the length of the complex. That's the actual museum. There's gift shops and there's some other buildings and stuff around it, but that is the actual museum. And you just basically start at one end of this thing and go the length of it, but you're kind of weaving in and out from side to side. And look, here's an area with information about this, then information about this, and it also kind of goes in a bit of a timeline. Very well laid out. Very busy in there too. Once you get to the very end and you walk out the door, you're effectively greeted with this scene. So I just had to stop and get a quick image of that. We're walking around outside the complex, and there was just some neat features on the wall. Little photo opportunity, so snag that. So yeah, the Warsaw Ghetto Square balcony. It's this outdoor plaza. And yeah, so there's a commemoration of this. So at the time of World War II, Warsaw, Poland, had one of the larger Jewish communities around, I believe. And so early on, I mean, I think people are pretty well acquainted with, you know, the idea of people being rounded up and put on trains and taken to these concentration or death camps and just being brutalized and but before that, that was kind of the final solution, as it were. But that it didn't start at that. What happened more was a lot of these people were just basically kicked out of their homes and businesses and rounded up and put into these ghettos. And there was actually a number of them in different areas, but maybe one of the largest and most notorious was this Warsaw ghetto. And just unbelievable squalor that these people were forced into. The lack of food, lack of cleanliness, lack of medicine, just lack of anything. So it was a common occurrence to be walking down the street and stepping over dead bodies. Just insane that something like that could happen. And so the murals in the background and that just commemorate this in this Warsaw Ghetto Square. A very quick story that I would tell, that they have areas where witnesses and people that lived through the Holocaust recount what happened to them. Most of these people at the time were more children, and now at the point they're giving this testimony and kind of telling this story, they're a lot older. And despite the number of years, you can still see the haunted look in their eyes and how they're fighting back tears, and it is still deeply traumatic to look back on it. But there was one story that it wasn't the only time that I broke into tears, but it was, I think, the first one in being in the museum. But there was a story told by a lady. She was obviously a child at the time. I think she said she might have been around 10 years old, somewhere in that vicinity. But she had her and her sister and her mother, and they lived in an apartment. And was this in Poland? Might have been Ukraine. I don't remember for sure where it was. But basically, they had the local police. This wasn't even the Germans or the SS or the Nazis or anything. This was the local police going around rounding up the Jews. And such was happening here, and there was a knock at the door. And the mother knew what it was. She knew what was going on. So they had prearranged a hiding spot in their apartment. And it was in a closet of some kind, or tucked back corner of a closet. So she put her two girls in there, and she went and answered the door, because if you didn't, it was not going to be pretty. And of course, they informed her that she needed to come with them. They were taking her away. And so she knew full well what was going on. She asked the officer if she could go get her jacket. He agreed. So she went to the closet where her girls were hidden and opened it up to grab her jacket and just told them goodbye. And that was it. This lady telling the story never saw her mother again. Yeah. So Yad Vashem was a tough one to get through. And there's another thing coming up here shortly. So outside of the main museum, we were wandering along and we stumbled across this. We actually didn't even know what it was. We just said, well, this looks kind of interesting. So I had to kind of get a little video walking in. This is the Children's Memorial. So as we get down here, and I don't want to talk while you see this video, although you can start to hear some music happening there. But when you actually enter this thing, it is super dark, and there's just a walkway that kind of goes in a circle. But the effect is that they have a candle in the center of the room, and it's just using a multitude of mirrors and bouncing this light over and over again. So the light of this candle makes these dots all over the place, and each one of these represents one of these children. And the entire time that you're in there, all you hear is they're reciting the name of the child, what country they were from, how old they were, because these were all children that died in the Holocaust, whether at camps or otherwise, many times just firing squads and stuff like that. But I'm going to let that one talk without any talking from me on it, so I mention it now. There's the actual entryway.
Shlomo Yosef Klein, 14 years old, Czechoslovakia. Tibor Klein, 14 years old, Czechoslovakia. Robert Klein, 10 years old, Czechoslovakia. Judith Homik, 3 years old, Belarus. Moshe Moses, Ben 7, Romania. Rachel Rosa Greenfeld, 17 years old, Czechoslovakia. Ben Theo Greenberg, 2 years old, Poland. Schaaf, 9-year-old, Pauline. ציון צוקרמן, בן 14, רומניה. אנדרש סיומן, 5 years old, Hungary. Vladimir Zikir, 1 year old, Ukraine.
So yeah, that entire trip was very profound. And like I said, there was more than one time that I found myself in tears. I'm glad that a place like that exists. I do recall at the time that all happened, I believe it was Eisenhower went in there when the Allies won and started going in and liberating and freeing these the remaining people in these camps, and the absolute horror and devastation that they saw, that he ordered them to bring in film crews and take pictures and videos, because his comment was something very close to the effect of, because someday some sick SOB will deny that this happened. And that's why we have Yad Vashem. So, yeah, it was a very powerful one. 1.5 million Jewish children. So this is an interesting little one. We're just back at Old City. This more or less is where I kind of vantage point where I took my video of the sunrise, because that's the Mount of Olives off in the distance there. But where those two kids are sitting, that's a vantage point that my friend and I, we spent quite a bit of time at. It's just a great view looking over. But and if you were to go on the other side of that big wall to the left, basically you're at the Western Wall. So just down that hill and to the left a little bit. And actually, just almost down the street to the feet of where that kid is sitting on the wall, that's that excavated area for the parking lot, which they discovered to be the city of David. This is super early in the morning, and they're all going for prayer time at the Western Wall. So that's all these people are kind of making their way down. And we're still in Sukkot, so they have their etrog and lulav for waving, doing the wave ceremony. An interesting little thing. So in our neck of the woods, the police, you only ever see them with their lights on if they're responding to a call. It seems like in Israel here, they just have them on all the time, regardless of what's going on. It was an interesting little thing I noted. And this is the day before the hostilities broke out in Gaza. Or near Gaza, I should say. Yeah, less than 24 hours after this moment here, everything changed. Still photo of me doing the sunrise thing. This was my sunrise attempt number 2. And I did include that video, which I have as an exclusive clip up on Rumble, but I've included it here. So there is the sunrise over the Mount of Olives, my time-lapse video there. Wanted to include it in the presentation here. Continuing on from there, this is another image of the Zion Gate. And yeah, so like I said, from the direction that we were traveling from our Airbnb, or at least our original one, this was the best access for us. But it also led out to an area outside of the Ottoman Wall, where it had some really interesting stuff, and we liked going out there because it was a lot less populous, and there was a little more greenery, and you could just kind of sit down and just have some peace and quiet and stuff. So we hung out there quite a bit. In wandering away from, or kind of halfway between that area in my previous video where we mentioned First Station, which used to be the Ottoman train station. Halfway between there and Old City, we ran into this area, and I'll have an explanation in the video. I just want to do a little preface here because this is a little goofy, but it touches on something that is no joke. I hope everyone can appreciate that it really was just coming from a place of my twisted and dark sense of humor, and having to do with a unclear understanding of some terminology from Hebrew to English, and how it kind of results in this. So this little bit coming up here, it is really intended just for a little joke. It is not to dismiss any of the seriousness behind some of the subject. But part of this area, it's the Valley of Gehinnom. There was this drawbridge, which was quite wild, and it looked relatively new. And it's like, well, we got to go across that. So here we are. So this is quite the funky little suspension bridge. Doesn't get super tall, and it looks pretty new in the grand scheme of things. I don't know how much of this you'll hear over the wind, but I'm giving it a shot. At the very least, it'll be a visual. A little harder to see that way. Yeah. Feel free if you want to go. I don't mind sitting down for a second. Or at the very least, yeah. So that was kind of an aborted trip going across that suspension. I said drawbridge, but it's suspension bridge. I did actually, after a couple of minutes, I was starting to feel a little queasy, and I didn't need to be getting ill on camera, so I kind of aborted and turned around. But after I sat down for a couple of minutes and everything kind of settled down, I was feeling pretty good, and I actually got up and went all the way across and came back. Because I really needed to. It was just kind of really neat to have it right there. This is all just views from the suspension bridge. This actually is the far side. Took that still. So we had to make a special trip here. I am now descending some stairs and making my way into hell. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, this is hell. It is the Valley of Gehinnom, which gets Englishized into the word Gehenna, often taken to be hell. So I can now tell you in all sincerity, it takes about, at least from our apartment, about 40 minutes to walk to hell. So another 40 minutes back, and that's about an hour and a half to go to hell and back. Quite lovely. I thought about having a picnic here. Not a lot of benches. I would have expected to see a few more benches. But we are right in a valley, as you can see. I mean, it goes up there and it's up all over here. So it descends down into this valley of Gehinnom. Now, to be fair, there is a bit of a morbid or dark history to this place. It was, well, for a while, it was a garbage dump. But at one point, it might have been during the Crusader period, possibly. I could be wrong on that. But it was used to dump the bodies of people that basically were homeless or they couldn't identify, and they had nowhere else to put them or bury them. So they had these big kind of dome things with a hole in the top of it, and they would take the dead bodies and drop them through the hole, and where they fell into the valley below. So at the very least, you could say that in a fashion they were buried. But yes, this is hell. There's Kevin. He went to hell too.
Entering the shot. Did you trip on a rock?
That's soil.
Okay.
Okay, so having put that behind us, moving along, nothing to see here. Another one of the big stops for me. So we had seeing the Isaiah scroll and the miniature of the Second Temple at the Israel Museum. But another big one for me was making a trip to Ophel Garden. Ophel Garden is within Old City. And it is, well, you'll see some of the pictures and stuff here to show some of the area, but it's an area of significance to me and to others, I would say. But earlier opportunities, we either didn't have the right timing or we just were busy doing other stuff. So this was our last opportunity, again, October 6th, to actually get out there and finally make a stop. So in the entranceway to entering the Ophel Garden, you get this little mock-up which shows, again, Jerusalem and the Temple Mount area and everything in bronze. It was kind of a neat one. Greetings and shalom. This is Adrian Scott, and you are listening to Truth and Testimony, the broadcast. I'm at pretty special location. I've been waiting a while to do this one since we've been in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem, but I am in Ophel Garden. And if you turn around behind me there, that is the Temple Mount up there. So we're right in the heart of the old city. This is a part with some ruins. There's a section which is, I'm gonna turn around again. Basically, right over by that corner, and I've got some pictures already, where the stones have been cast down as the temple was destroyed by the Romans in the year, what was it, 68 or 70 AD. But just a profound moment to be here. And we got here nice and early enough in the morning that I don't have to deal with too many crowds. So that always helps. And just, I'm feeling very blessed and humbled and honored to be able to be in a location like this and do this. So, Ophel Garden, right by the Temple Mount. The Wailing Wall, the Western Wall, is just around that corner, down, further down. So, 4-minute walk from here. And I do have a little bit of picture and video of that. But this is a little bit of the exterior of the Ottoman ramparts that pretty much goes all the way around Old City. So the whole thing is kind of surrounded by this wall. But yeah, here we are. I made it. I am here. Oh, just soak it all in. I really do find myself at a bit of a loss for words at the moment. So I am gathering all my picture and video footage. I'll be editing a whole bunch of stuff. So there's going to be a series of videos that I'm sure I'll be putting up. Just enjoy the peace and quiet right now. Here's a quick panorama from without having to stare at me. So yes, from Ophel Gardens at the base of the Temple Mount. I am Adrian Scott. I just wish blessings to all of you. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Blessed are you, O Yehovah our God, King of the universe. That has blessed me with the opportunity to be here, and I just pray that this would be a blessing to you as well, watching. Thank you for joining me. Have a great day. Bye for now. Yeah, it was actually quite moving to be there. I was at a point in my life where it just was kind of like, I don't know that I will ever get there. And now all of a sudden at that moment, boom, there I am. So there's some really interesting things to see here that will be coming up in a moment, but to set the stage, so all of this is heavily excavated area. And one of the neatest parts coming up is going to be the money changers tables, the booths where they would have been set up. And this is at the time of Yeshua, when he goes in there and says he turned over the tables of the money changers, and that chewed them out basically for turning his father's house into a house of deceit and ill profit and stuff like that. But Ophel Garden. Now this is a video. It's kind of intended to be something I could use as a background shot for other things in the future. But I wanted to include it in here. It's just, you can hear the sounds of Israel, the sounds of Jerusalem. One other area that's just to the left here, and you can actually see a little bit of the building. There was a small museum area within the Ophel Garden. And also behind me, outside of the wall, there's a bunch of ruins and a whole bunch of walkways that travel through there. Featured a couple of pictures of that in that sunrise over the Mount of Olives video. You can see those at the end, but you'll be seeing more here in a second. Anyways, just enjoy the sight and sound. So at this point, just starting to do some more exploring of Ophel Garden and the surrounding area. There is a small fee to get into this place, so I really wanted to take the opportunity to, get around, try to get some pictures and videos. And just doing kind of a walk around of the immediate garden area to start. The only painful part of this is with my Canon M50 Mark II, for anyone that might be interested. But again, I thought that I had the image stabilization going on this, but apparently I did not. So as still as I am trying to keep this thing, it is kind of herky-jerky around here. So try to bear with the visual stutter. There's the residue of another sukkah from the tail end of Sukkot. Hadn't been quite disassembled yet. Directly ahead is a museum within the garden that you'll be seeing a little bit of in a bit, shortly. Really, my rationale with this was just, we're here. We're actually walking around in Israel, and of more significance, in Old City. We're steps away from places where the disciples and the Messiah wandered around, amongst other people. But they're the ones I care about. And again, just to the left around that big wall, that's the Western Wall, and then of course above is the Temple Mount. And just archaeological finds and excavations everywhere. I absolutely would say if anyone has the opportunity to go to Israel, take it. It is such a fascinating place to be. That part of the world, it doesn't just have to be Israel, in this case it was, but that part of the world, the Middle East and Africa and parts of Europe, they're so old that it's just everywhere you go, it's history. It's just history, every direction around you. It really does, hit home, the part of the world I live in, how new and recent it is. So going through those doorways, which I will be doing, there's a more excavation area. In fact, I think it includes some mikvahs, which were ceremonial baths for the temple period. And of course the Mount of Olives in the distance right there. Those are all tombs, they're all coffins. So you can go for a walk on the upper rampart area, and this is just taking one more kind of panorama looking down at the garden area proper. Those would have been some sort of apartments or homes there. Just random shots looking around different directions. So this one here, you can actually go down and enter everything. I'm just getting a panorama of this excavation area. But right in that corner, that's where you can go down and actually go through the remains of a house looking down from the top. But that's actually a door over there to get into it. But I think I get down there and I sneak a couple of pictures in. Yeah, here we go. So I'm descending, making my way down to check it out. Very tight corridor. I got my butt rubbing up on one wall and my gut rubbing up on the other wall, shimmying sideways to get through there. Looking inside one of those homes. And a doorway to another one. Did try to get a shot of a staircase out, but was fighting the lighting in there, so it's a little blurry. And standing up top, outside of the Ottoman wall, this is that mikveh area. Looking over the Mount of Olives again. Getting a bit of a closer shot of the Mount of Olives. You can see all those tour buses just lined up. All day, every day. Kind of an overview shot of that mikveh area. And just off to the right, you can't quite see it. That's where that excavation of the city of David is. There's a picture of it, actually. I forgot I had this in here. Active excavation right there. So mikvahs, I know I've said the word, those again are the ceremonial baths that people and priests would take prior to entering the temple or temple area. Now you can see the remains. That was a gate there. It's been stoned over and hidden, but you can still see the remains of the archway, part of the archway of that gate. And there's another one. You can see three. They're bricked over, but there are three. That's another old gate entry system. Closer shot of it, so you can totally see where the gates were and stoned off by the Ottomans. Another shot looking down at some of these excavated mikvahs. I don't know if they were all mikvahs. There may have been some homes down there as well, included in that. Or preparation quarters of some kind, maybe. Just a little side note, it was hot in the sun out here. It was starting to get uncomfortable. The things I do for you guys. Yeah, you can see the smooth sides of how water used to be in there. I think at some point I do actually have a picture of the sign. Oh yeah, here. Describing a little bit of this. This is me trying to back up and get a funky shot with a bunch of equipment strapped on my back, walking backwards to an area I don't know. Looking down in one of the mikvahs. It's my friend up by the remains of that one gateway. Had to kind of sneak that picture in. So now this is where it gets cool. I'm heading towards that money changer market area at this point. In fact, there's kind of standing over it there, you can see the entryways to it. I will get a cleaner shot. And those stones in the back, those are the stones cast down at the time of the destruction of the temple. just the level of archaeology and digging going on, excavations. Getting a couple of still pictures. Of course, off in the distance and up above, that's that ramp going up to the Temple Mount. And just beyond that ramp is, again, the Western Wall. Now here's a cool one. I wanted to do a side scroll of these little market booths. So this is where the money changers had their tables. And Yeshua walks by. May have been on the Shabbat as well, flipping those tables over. He was not impressed. Not impressed at the slightest. And I'm standing right there. Almost a surreal moment. I had to get that picture of just me, I'm here. I'm standing here. Yeah, with the thrown down stones. So this is inside that little museum that's in Ophel Garden. Just some cool stuff here. This was a super cool effect where they've got this stone wall and they just had these projectors. Now, you don't see it in the video, truly, but it almost looks slightly holographic. But they're projecting just onto the wall. And so it's not really intended to necessarily read what's here, but just enjoy the visual effect of having the signage just cast as this moving image on the wall. It just was a neat visual. Now this one is fully, again, you don't quite see it here. I hope you almost get a sense of the effect, but this is fully holographic, and the way they're making this image is like it's floating in midair. And there's that menorah. And you almost see it. That's why I threw this in here, because with that effect, you can almost see it looks how it is floating in air. And it's a couple of feet behind what you're seeing here is where the wall is. Now, you got to bear with this one. Really, again, not totally intended to read all of this. It is meant. This one is meant as a visual. So if you look at this, I mean, this is a book of types, but you can see the effect of what they're doing here. I know the lighting is showing through, but this is a book. And just to illustrate the point, those are pages of the book. So just super cool how they accomplished that. This is another significant milestone. We had been trying since we got to Jerusalem to get to this location. This is the tomb of David. And that sarcophagus right there that they are praying over is the sarcophagus of King David. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe the idea is his actual remains would be in there. But whether or not they are, I don't know that for sure. But that would be the sarcophagus of King David, and in an area they call the tomb of King David. And it was so busy with Jewish people in there with their services for Sukkot and prayer times that we really, we didn't want any disrespect or anything, so we just held off going in there, but we really wanted to go in. This was the quietest that we saw it at, where we were able to kind of sneak in there, so took the opportunity when we could find it. just outside of that first room, here's another area. And this, again, just illustrates that idea of the menorah. Although, as I'm looking at, that's an 8 branch. So that would be a Hanukkah. Just outside of that room with the sarcophagus of David, but still in the tomb of David here. And we are happy to be in there, so had to sneak that picture in there. Interestingly enough, this room is almost directly beside where the upper room is, which we saw in the previous video. All right, so when you're doing all this walking around and traversing, because it's just the preferred way to go, you're almost certainly going to build up a pretty good appetite. And I can tell you, if you really find yourself hungry, please feel free to check out the Holy Bagel, right in Old City, just around the corner from the Temple Institute. And you know what? I mean, maybe that's a little heavy for you. You just want a beverage or something. Well, instead, you can always check out the Holy Cafe. Having said that, of course, you are going to need some money. So don't be surprised if you need to make a trip to the Holy ATM. And if you do all that and you get back and it's just too crowded and too busy, you can always use the Holy Vending Machine. Tourist tips from Adrian Scott. Bye now. So here's a short video. We're actually walking through the Zion Gate, entering the Old City. Now, actually, wait a minute. Are we entering or leaving? Oh, I think we're stepping out. Yeah. Yes, indeed. So coming out of here, if you turn right, that would go to our Airbnb and also where the Valley of Gatineau is. If you go to the left, you can start walking around the complex a little bit. Getting a little shot of the outside of the gate. So this is the conclusion of this video, and I just close with this shot in the background. This is one of the market areas, what do they call that? The Shuk, right beside our Airbnb, like a 2-minute walk. As a matter of fact, immediately to my right of this picture, what you're not seeing is my friend ordering us 2 falafels at one of the best falafel stands in Jerusalem. So while he was doing that, it's just like I had to just illustrate this. And this is actually relatively quiet. It can be much busier than this even. And for the duration of Sukkot, this was a lot of streets. Anywhere was just this crowded. But yeah, I had to get this little image here. When we pick up in the next video, that begins October 7th. And I wanted to close on this because this really shows that image of just people being out, living life, and starting the next video, you see the difference of the impact that the attack from Hamas on that morning of October 7th played. That will be the next video. So on that note, I will wrap it up. I do hope you enjoyed this one and that it blessed you. And I do say blessings to you all in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach. And yeah, look forward to seeing you in the next video. Please don't forget to like the video, share, and subscribe. And if you do subscribe, hit that notification bell so that you're notified when any of these videos come out or any other content that Ray and I are doing. And we are doing content, which includes comments. Yeah, it's been a long day, and this was a long video, so thanks for bearing through it with me. Hopefully it was enjoyable for you. It was just kind of a neat for me to look back on it. And I will see you in the next video. So shalom. Bye for now.
You've been watching Truth and Testimony, the broadcast. If you have a comment, please leave it on the bottom of this video or email us at truthandtestimonyemail@gmail.com. Again, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Truth and Testimony, the broadcast, is not affiliated with Truth and Testimony magazine.